And now, please welcome the co-founder and chairman of Intrepid, Darrell Wade, in conversation with Skift founder and CEO, Rafat Ali.
All right. Hey, folks, and Heisha, I hope you feel better. Just to clarify, we didn't force Heisha to do this. I know she's going through COVID, just recovering. The backstory, this is true. This is what travel is today. She was supposed to be on an Alaska cruise right now this week. She and her family planning it for months. And her family got COVID a week ago. Royal Caribbean actually refunded her whole thing. So I do want to thank Royal Caribbean. They refunded without even asking too many questions. So this is the new reality. When she figured out that she can't be on the cruise, she said, I want to do this. And so just for people who are watching, we didn't force her to do this. So thank you, Heisha, for going through it. So Darrell, welcome. I know you're also traveling. This is the new world that all of us are traveling. All of us are getting sick. Everything is either being canceled or delayed, but people are still traveling. So it's kind of a nuts situation in travel. Is this the most nuts you've seen the travel industry in your long career?
It's a great intro question, Rafat. Is it the most nuts? Yeah, I've been in it for 30 plus years, and so I suppose I've seen a few disasters and nut situations. But yes, look, reality is it is. It's no one's seen anything like this. I don't think for 100 years we've seen anything like this. I think it's coming out of it, but as you say, it's not an easy exit, is it? And it's it's just a constant battle.
Well, so the reason why I wanted to do this interview with you, and well, thank you for your support of Skift over the years. What people may or may not know is Darrell has been a long-time supporter of Skift. He's responsible for actually literally single-handedly kicking off a great side of our business, Skift Text, which is our content studio, started because Darrell said, I want to put out a report on experiential travel. Remember that in like...
You've got a better memory than me.
Yeah. 2013 or 14 or something like that. And so that was the first time something clicked in our head and said, oh, I guess we got to create a content studio for requests like these. So thank you for
We probably should do another one.
We probably should do another one. James, who's probably watching your CEO now. Hey, James. So the reason I wanted you to be on it is because you personally, as well as Intrepid as a company, has been at the forefront of thinking about whatever you want to call sustainability, probably even before that term came in, meaningful travel. Tour operators as a sector, it seems like, are one of the front lines of travel. They're the ones who take people into communities, into places, and seem to have the best understanding out of pretty much everybody else in the ecosystem on the effect of travel and travelers on communities. And so from your perspective, having been through this, you are a B Corp, and we're going to talk about the B Corp as well in a second. I want to get your sense of the progress, and does it matter or not at this point after having gone through the process a couple of times now, maybe more than that at this point. So why do you think tour operators are at the front lines of sustainability, and what does that mean?
Look, Rafat, I think you've answered your own question, really. I think it's because we are at the forefront, literally, in the physical sense. As you say, we're dealing in destinations, we're on the ground, we're talking to locals, we're face-to-face with communities. And those places that we go to quite often are delicate, and speaking for Intrepid, we're often in fairly remote kind of areas, in fragile communities, in fragile environments. And that's one of the reasons we go there. And so as a result, we're probably slightly more sensitive to changes and risks that perhaps, if you're in the airline industry or the conventional hotel industry, you are. So, yeah, I think we're literally just in the right place to be aware of it. And I think, take something like climate change. It really doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to realize that a lot of the places we go to are going to be extra impacted by climate change, whether that's remote hill stations or beaches or national parks or whatever. Just that's where the impacts are going to probably be seen before the New Yorks, Londons, Shanghais of the world.
And so for Intrepid as a company, you've been very outspoken about, you personally are on the board of WTDC. I've talked about sustainability from there. Now you're on the board of Travelist, which is an initiative that Prince Harry and a bunch of travel companies, including yours, Booking and others, are part of as well. You're very focused on sustainability targets and frameworks and data, etc. there as well.
Yeah.
So give a sense of your personal involvement in this.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure why it ended up this way. I guess from the early days, we had a one particularly outspoken staff member, like this is kind of year 2, year 3 of the company, who really kind of highlighted the impact we were having as a travel company. And that really started us thinking about it a lot more. And certainly, kind of way before it was trendy to talk about it, we were kind of looking at how we could be better citizens in destinations and what kind of things had negative impacts on our role. And as time would go on, we got better at certain things, but certain things we didn't necessarily. And so then we kind of got into the whole measurement phase, and we just kind of realized that we needed to start to analyze where our impact was, both positive and negative, and what we could do about it. And you touched on B Corp before, but that's one of the real attractions to us, because it kind of gives you an audit trail over sustainability so that you can start to really genuinely improve. Companies tend to be fairly competitive beasts. We always want to beat last year's results, and sometimes that's beating last year's sales or profitability, but it can also beating your sustainability metrics. So, if we've got a carbon issue, for instance, we really want to get that lower, and it becomes a part of the company psyche almost to get that down. And so if you have, it's the old cliche, isn't it? If you're measuring it, you start to manage it. So
what are you not satisfied with in the company's progression towards becoming more and more sustainable today?
Well, look, the truth of the matter is, any tour operator, and definitely Intrepid can be included in this, we've got a long way to go. Our gender diversity isn't as good as it should be. Our climate emissions, we still emit a lot of carbon. Yes, we're carbon negative, but climate zero. But if you look at it, we still have emissions. And so we've got to get those emissions down. That's one of the great powers that Haysha was talking about earlier. Science-Based Targets Initiative purely looks at what your emissions are. It doesn't care whether you offset or not. It looks at your actual emissions, because emissions what count. And so by signing up to Science-Based Targets Initiative, you get that metric, and then you start to work out how to actually reduce it. So, it's a great initiative.
In terms of so many standards, everybody's coming out with standards. Different countries have different rules. EU has different rules. Your company is headquartered in Australia. I'm guessing there are different rules there. Does the standards confusion hinder progress?
Yes and no. I think to a certain extent it hinders progress to the degree that it creates confusion. And so, I suspect a lot of people on this call will be thinking, oh, gee, it all looks so hard. There's this. Some of the people on the call probably haven't even heard of science-based targets, for instance. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's another standard. That's the negative. The positive is that there's some clear methodology that if you go to certain things, such as SBTI, and link into that and work that through, that will then cascade down to a whole lot of other initiatives anyway. So if you get the right kind of helicopter method, and this again is where B Corp is quite good, and Travelist also is creating a framework for it, then all sorts of other things come to that. So like in the context of Intrepid, we're signatories to probably about 7 or 8 different standards methodologies. But the reality is, if you do 2 or 3 of them, after that, you're kind of 90% of the way on all of them. So, it's just a matter of what you want to achieve.
In terms of, as a tour operator, you're just coming out of the pandemic. In fact, tour operators were probably the hardest hit out of all sectors in travel, because your whole reason for existence is taking people cross-border, and borders were closed. Obviously, Australia just opening, is opened up now. New Zealand is just opening up. There's an argument, or at least you would think that people would push sustainability back a little bit because they're focused just on recovery today. Is that, from your perch of having talking to a lot of CEOs and your compatriots in different industries, is that what you're seeing, or you feel like there's seriousness in terms of intent and action?
Yeah, look, it's pretty mixed. That's my view on it anyway. I think on early on in the pandemic, I think there was a lot of noise about Build Back Better and all that kind of stuff. And, I think some of it, to be, this sounds a bit cynical and not very nice, but some of it was just press releases and embedded in the marketing department. And that's, or maybe in the boardroom, which is arguably even worse. And so that was pretty disappointing. What I have seen, though, is that there's a significant number of companies, and maybe it's a third or something like that, that really went beyond that kind of rhetorical flourish and really did drop down and said, okay, what are we going to do about that? And that's been incredibly pleasing to see. And it's sustainability is not necessarily easy. It's heavy lifting to a degree. Even just one aspect, which is climate change. There's quite a lot of work involved in measuring your emissions and working out a pathway to decarbonize. So, we've got to, throw people a bone to a certain extent. But the point is, it does need companies' engagement. So they've got to sign up to, science-based targets or Travelist or whatever it is to really have that line in the sand and then go through with their operating teams and their finance teams and all the rest of it to work out how they're going to fulfill their commitments which they've signed up to. So, look, I really do honestly think there's a level of collaboration which I have never seen before, and that's really positive. The negative on it, I reckon half of the companies, maybe even a little bit more, still have done nothing. And Haysha kind of touched on this in her intro, which, by the way, I thought was outstanding. And really it's got to get a more broad-based approach. At WTTC, there's a good number of companies that are talking in the right way. There's a certain number of companies that are really committing, but there's not enough companies that are actually putting the rubber on the road.
And do you think the collaboration between, say, companies and governments, and you, I'm guessing at WTTC level, even at Travelist level, and even in your own level, are working with governments, is that collaboration? I mean, certainly no collaboration happened on COVID, even though there was so much intent on COVID and vaccines and stuff. I know you guys were, Intrepid was at the forefront of vaccine equity as well. But not much collaboration happened, even though there was lots of intent.
Yeah, and I think COVID, I think you're 100% right. It's if there's ever going to be a better reason to collaborate with government, that would have been it, surely. And there was bits and pieces, but when it all boils down, every country did whatever they were going to do for themselves. And I don't think any industry, let alone travel, was going to impact on that. So I think that's just the way it was. I think sustainability is arguably slightly different, whereby there's one, it's longer term, but secondly, there is a genuine level of alignment. A country on its own is not going to solve climate change. It has to do it with all the relevant stakeholders. So therefore, it has to engage business in that journey particularly. And, travel and tourism accounts for between 9 and 11% of total greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a really big sector, although we don't really behave like a big sector at times. So, I think that level of engagement is really critical going forward.
Brian, can you let me know how many minutes are left just in the chat here? So let's move on to a very important, which is the traveler intent versus traveler behavior. This is what everybody's trying to figure out. I know you have views on it. What's your sense? I mean, traveler intent is there, but behavior today is not there. And actually a related question, which you and I discussed before in the pre-call, was does sustainability have to be more expensive?
Yeah. So first of all, intent is there. I mean, I think there's enough surveys on that. I keep referring to a booking.com survey.
They're showing that on the screen right now.
Okay. So on this one, 73% US travelers. On a global survey, the Booking did, it was 81% of travelers say that sustainability is important. 59% of travelers want to leave a place better than they found it. That's a pretty amazing statistic. Now, whether that drops down into actual behavior change, and particularly, at point of transaction, that's a slightly different question. But I've just had 3 weeks in Norway, which is an interesting country and perhaps not a part of the real world in some senses. But what's interesting, I was at one particular mini resort or large hotel, and they were talking about how the percentage of business that they got had gone from a very much a minority of Norwegian travellers to actually now a majority of Norwegian travellers. And that wasn't COVID related, it was sustainability related. So, and I'm seeing across Scandinavia, and Scandinavia is perhaps early on this cycle.
Right.
But, you know, they really are actually acting on their intent now by travelling closer to home and not getting in planes. And, you know, I think many of us in the industry have been slightly fearful that if we don't get our house in order, people will start doing this. And, you know, they'll stop flying, they'll travel close to home. And I can understand that, particularly when it comes to climate change. However, there's still enormous benefits of the world of travel that brings in terms of peace dividends, economic redistribution, opportunities for people, etc. So, you know, we've got to be a little bit careful, which makes me think that it's all the more urgent to get on to climate change, solving it, so that people don't just say, you know what, that's it's the new tobacco, it's the new oil, you know, I'm not going to get in a plane because it's bad news. And right today, they're right, of course.
Yeah. We do have time for questions. So people, there are two questions already. If people have other questions, please put in the chat on SpotMe, the platform you're watching it through. So a couple of questions, Darrell, I'll come. Actually, there are 3 questions now, but so what, in your experience, are the best tools to analyze impact on destinations? Is there a balance between desktop analysis versus boots on the ground?
Yeah, so look, I'm not we're an expert on destination impact in terms of our own specific footprint. But in terms of talking about it at a national footprint or a city-based footprint or whatever, you know, I'm not one to talk to.
Okay, that's fine.
You know, so I think I'll pass on that. There are out there. Destinations are hard, I should say, though. Destinations are one of the harder. Aviation is kind of simple to the degree that you've got a plane. A city or a country is a complex beast.
It's a complex piece. And I'm sure maybe some of the other speakers may have more answers to it, Brian, if you want to bring it up for other speakers that are coming. What do you think is the biggest barrier to companies investing more in sustainability?
I think it's as simple as complacency. You know, I think a lot of companies still just think, oh, look, someone else will work that, or it's not, you know, for me here and now, or I'm just trying to make the company profitable. You know, we've got to come out of this COVID and all the rest of it. And so they're just not actually thinking about it. And you know, this, to be honest, annoys the hell out of me, because I just got to think, well, look, if you guys don't think about it, if we as participants don't think about it, then, you know, we have an existential crisis on our hands, particularly climate change, but also other issues. And I think it's the role of every CEO and every board, and to a certain extent, every staff member to start, and customer for that matter, to start banging the drum and just say, hey, hang on a sec, this is important. We've got to do something on this. And it starts at home, doesn't it? It starts, you know, literally in your house, but also in your own hotel or your own company, your own tour operator, your own airline, whatever it is. And I just think, you know, if you don't stand up and own the issue, then sure, it'll just keep passing you by. The other thing I'd kind of like to say, though, is that a lot of sustainability conversations concentrates on the negative. You know, you know, there's negative outsides and all the rest of it. There's also a really big positive. And, you know, on this one, I will talk about Intrepid. You know, Intrepid has grown, generally speaking, around 25% a year, every year, forever. Not the last 2, obviously, but, and you know, from now on, in fact, already we're looking like probably something like that again next year. So, you know, and we've, as you've said, we've been quite outspoken, be it on climate change or on gender or on COVID or whatever it is. And so it's not a zero-sum game. You know, you can do both. You can really concentrate on these issues, be good citizens, and guess what? Your profitability kind of looks after itself. Your customers kind of like you for it. Your staff kind of like you for it. Your staff turnover is low as a result. So there's a real lot of positives that come out of tackling sustainability well. And, you know, I look around, and the companies that are doing well are also the companies that are growing. So, you know, I don't think that's just chance.
Thank you. That was actually a very inspiring message. Are investors, and you took investment in the pandemic from this large investment firm in French-based investment firm, public investors, are they asking questions from you when they're investing about your sustainability targets, etc.? Are they serious about it?
Well, yes, I think they are. So we had a few different conversations with private equity firms and so forth. But the firm we actually went with is a private family business, obviously a high net worth family. But interestingly enough, we didn't seek them out, they sought us out. And the reason they sought us out was specifically because of our sustainability stance. So I've had conversations with them since about it and said, oh, you want to look at this company or that company for other potential investments. And they're kind of saying, no, the only thing we're actually interested in is sustainable travel, renewable energy, and education. That's its investment mandate. And so they knocked on our door, and to be honest, I'd never heard of them. And I told our CFO to tell them to go away because I thought they were tire kickers mid-COVID. Turns out they weren't. And in fact, they're utterly committed to sustainability and see travel in that context. And so we got a, to be honest, a really attractive valuation, purely off the back of our past history and, our growth, obviously, but also what we do in sustainability. They wanted to be a part of it.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. There are a bunch of questions coming. It looks like everybody's very engaged with what you're saying, Darrell. Do you believe there's a difference between sustainability versus regeneration? There's a regenerative travel, which is leave it better than you saw it type mentality. Is that possible?
Look, I think in a micro area, it is possible. You look at some of the areas where they've regenerated farmlands into forest and then incorporated some sustainable tourism into that context. And it's great. It's really good. I'm all for it. Where I get a little bit thing on the whole conversation is it can be another thing to confuse people. And I think, I don't know whether it's sustainability or any other word you want to throw around, but let's just stick to sustainability for the sake of the exercise. And then we all know kind of roughly what we mean. And, sustainability can apply to everything from a hotel in a city to a plane to a cruise ship to a regenerative project, so it's fine. It's all good as long as we know what we're talking about and moving forward and getting improvements.
I guess this last thing, what is the biggest mistake you've made on making sustainability a fundamental part of your business model? If you can think of a mistake.
Look, I think sustainability is like anything, isn't it? Any form of innovation, for three things you get right, you'll probably get two things wrong. And that's just life, So I think kind of say the issue for me is whether or not you're having a crack at it. You've got to have a go at sustainability. You won't get it all right. But if you use your brain, you do a bit of reading, you consult with some experts, you'll get most of it right. So, never use, we might get it wrong as a reason not to give it a go. So, and to be honest, a little bit of reading, a little bit of thought, it's not that hard.
Well, thank you, Darrell. That's a great point to read and a great point to leave it at. And please continue reading Skift because Darrell reads Skift and gets a lot of his ideas. I'm sure he can vouch for that part.
Indeed, absolutely.
And thank you again, Darrell, and hope to see you face to face soon.
Look forward to it, Rafat. Cheers.